Nobody knows what the Maya who lived here called this city. Whatever name they carved for it is gone, lost with everything else that got destroyed. So when archaeologists finally found it, they had to name it themselves. They called it Minanbe. There is no way there. They meant it literally, about the jungle, about how hard it was to physically reach. But the deeper they dug, the more that name started to describe something else entirely. Because someone here, 1,000 years ago, tried to make sure nobody would ever come back. And they didn't use geography to do it. They used a hammer and a knife on their own monuments. This is the story of what they were trying to bury. Here's how hidden this place really was. Reaching it, even with the exact coordinates from satellite data, meant cutting 11 kilometers of trail by machete and all-terrain vehicle through jungles so dense there wasn't a single existing path. No hunting trails, no looter trails. In a region where almost every ruin has a trail worn into it by decades of people trying to reach it, this one had nothing. That kind of absence doesn't happen by accident. In this part of Mexico, isolation like that is almost always temporary. The jungle grows back fast, but people find their way to anything worth finding, eventually. A site sitting this far from open ground, with nothing leading to it, is the first sign that something here was meant to stay lost. So how do you find a city the jungle refuses to give up? You stop looking from the ground. A plane flew over the canopy, firing lasers at the forest floor, and researchers digitally stripped away every tree. Underneath, perfect right angles, 15 hectares of them. The one shape nature never builds by accident. What the ground team confirmed wasn't scattered ruins. It was a functioning capital, a pyramid temple over 13 meters tall, built in the Rio Bec style with twin towers designed to be seen from a distance, not hidden. Palace buildings, open plazas, terraced housing cut into the hillsides, an engineered water system, canals and wetlands built to survive the dry season, the kind of infrastructure you only build if you're planning to stay for generations, not passing through. This wasn't a city that expected to disappear. It was built by people planning to stay, which is exactly why what they found next doesn't add up. Scattered through the site, 14 stone monuments, stelae and altars, several carved with hieroglyphic text, the closest thing to a written record the Maya left behind. And some of them are destroyed. Not by roots, not by 1,000 years of rain. Researchers documented deliberate damage, done on purpose by human hands, after they were already carved. Here's the specific evidence, not just the theory. One of them, catalogued as Monument 6, still shows a ruler, a full figure wearing an elaborate feathered headdress and ceremonial regalia, surrounded by hieroglyphic cartouches that once recorded his name and his reign. That's not a generic carving. That's a portrait. Somebody in this city was important enough to be immortalized in stone, in detail, on purpose. And on a separate stela, researcher Octavio Esparza Olguin identified something more specific. A carved figure holding a knife or axe positioned next to calendar glyphs, the kind of pairing Maya carvers used to record a precise event on a precise date, not a myth or a generic warning. Whatever this stone was commemorating, it happened on a real day to a real person. Put a ruler's portrait next to a dated execution scene, and you're not looking at random vandalism. You're looking at two halves of the same story. Someone who ruled, and something violent that ended it. And there's a detail in the hieroglyphs that makes this stranger. Some of the surviving texts at Minambe date to the end of the 7th century, among the earliest inscriptions found anywhere in this part of the region, which means this city wasn't a minor outpost that popped up right before the collapse and got wiped out along with everyone else. It had a history stretching back generations before whatever happened to Monument 6, all the way to that 849 AD date on the other stela. Do the math, and that's a dynasty that held this city for close to 160 years. Someone didn't just end this city. They cut off a story that had already been running for 6 or 7 generations. So who did this? That's the part archaeologists are still working out. The best lead they have is timing. This same broader period saw groups from the rising powers of the northern Yucatan, the Puc region, known for cities like Uxmal, and later the early Itza, expanding south into territory that had belonged to older dynasties. These weren't outside invaders in the sense of a completely foreign culture. They were still Maya, but from a different political world, with different alliances and, judging by their own architecture, a different relationship to the rulers they were replacing. Researchers are actively investigating whether that expansion reached as far south as Minambe. Nobody's published a confirmed answer, and nobody claims to know the attackers' names or exactly where they came from. But the timing lines up almost too well. A dynasty that had held this city for close to 160 years, a portrait of its ruler, a dated scene of violence, and then silence, right as the balance of power in the region was visibly shifting toward the rising cities of the north. It would explain everything sitting in this city. A portrait of a ruler nobody finished protecting, a dated scene of violence, and a temple left standing while the historical record around it got taken apart piece by piece. So here's what actually happened to the name. Minambe, there is no way there, was never carved on a stela. Nobody wrote it 1,000 years ago. Modern researchers gave it that name because of the jungle, because of 11 kilometers of machete work. But whoever did this to Monument 6, and to that dated stela, had already left the exact same message, carved instead of spoken. A warning about what happens to the people who used to run this place. 2 different warnings, 1,000 years apart, that happen to say the same thing. That's either an extraordinary coincidence, or the jungle just finished a sentence someone started a millennium ago. One surviving stela carries a real date, recorded in the Maya calendar, the 5th day of the month Ahau, 849 AD. That lands right at the edge of what archaeologists call the late classic collapse, the decades when dozens of Maya cities across this entire region were abandoned, one after another, in what's still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in Maya archaeology. Whoever carved that date had no way of knowing they were recording one of the last chapters this city would ever have. Within about a century, Minambe was empty, and unlike most abandoned Maya cities, which got resettled, reused, or at least remembered in local stories for generations after, this one wasn't. Whatever happened here didn't just end the city. It erased the memory of it too, so completely that even its name had to be invented from scratch 1,000 years later by strangers who had no idea what they were about to walk into. Compare that to what usually happens when a Maya city empties out. Farmers move in decades later. New rulers repurpose the old temples for their own ceremonies. Oral histories keep the place's reputation alive even after the buildings crumble. None of that happened here. Whoever took this city didn't just replace its rulers. They seem to have made sure nobody ever came back at all, deliberately or not. And for 1,000 years, that's exactly what happened. There's one more thing worth sitting with. Every abandoned Maya city we already know about survived because somebody, at some point, remembered it existed, even if just as a name on a map or a ruin locals avoided. Menanbe survived the opposite way. It disappeared so completely that even the avoidance got forgotten. Nobody was left to tell the next generation to stay away. The jungle just quietly did the job instead, for 1,000 years, without anyone having to remember why. Almost every major Maya site still standing today has already been picked apart. Looters know exactly what these stones are worth on the black market. Stele gets sawed into pieces and sold to private collectors. Tombs get emptied before archaeologists ever arrive, sometimes years before anyone official even learns a site exists. In this region specifically, looting has erased more history than the jungle itself ever managed to. Entire dynasties known only from the fragments that happen to survive the saw. Menanbe is different, and researchers were explicit about it. No evidence of looting. None. In a region where that's the exception rather than the rule, it's worth sitting with how unusual that actually is. Somewhere within a few 100 kilometers of here, there's almost certainly a private collection holding a stela sawed out of some other city, sold through a chain of middlemen decades ago, its origins scrubbed off long before it reached a shelf. Menanbe never had that chance to be found by the wrong people first, which is exactly why what's left of it still reads like a complete sentence instead of a fragment. That's not luck. Whatever kept this place hidden for 1,000 years worked on everyone, not just historians, not just tourists, but on the people whose entire job is finding places like this and stripping them bare before anyone official ever gets a chance to study them. Which means the temple, the smashed monuments, that decapitation carving, the date staring straight at the region's collapse, all of it is sitting exactly where the last people to see this city left it over 1,000 years ago. No black market fragments missing from the collection. No half-dug looters' pits cutting through the evidence. Just the city, and whatever it was trying to tell whoever eventually found it. A modern name that means there is no way there. Invented by strangers who'd never read a single line of what happened here, ends up matching a warning that was already sitting in the ruins, waiting 1,000 years to be read correctly. Maybe that's coincidence. Maybe some kinds of violence leave a shape behind that outlasts language entirely. A shape a researcher standing in the same jungle, knowing none of this history, ends up describing almost by instinct. Menanbe wasn't the only secret this region gave up that week. The same 7 days this discovery went public, researchers announced a second, unrelated site 300 kilometers away in Veracruz, from an even earlier period with no known connection to any other Maya city. 2 hidden sites, 1 week,
30 years of searching to find either of them. Subscribe if you want the Veracruz story the moment we break it down.